Hello and welcome to the first work from home episode of Let's Talk. We don't have a fancy background or a standard deep contemplative lighting, but we do have a bookshelf instead. And we promise we'll bring you the major news developments of the day, as usual. Today, we're going to look at the response to the Prime Minister's speech yesterday and the failure of the government till date to announce a proper package for the millions of toiling Indians. We've had two speeches by the Prime Minister and a press conference by the Finance Minister, but no clear direction on the financial policy of the government towards the crisis. We'll be discussing this further, but here are some major developments from yesterday. The total number of cases in India has touched 564, with the active cases at 512. 11 people have died. The first death was recorded in Tamil Nadu yesterday. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the country yesterday and called for a 21-day lockdown from midnight. However, some critics pointed out he was not very clear enough on the supply of essentials, leading to panic buying across the country. The Prime Minister was forced to tweet again, that too in all caps, that there was no need to panic as all essential commodities and medicines would continue to be available. Earlier in the day, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman made certain key announcements. The last date for ITR for 2018-19 has been extended to June 30th, as has the last date for linking PAN with Aadhaar. The same is the case with the filing of GST returns for March, April and May. There is no need to maintain a minimum balance for 3 months in bank accounts, and ATM withdrawals from banks other than your own will not be charged for the same period. States continue to respond in different ways to the crisis. UP Chief Minister Aditya took part in a ceremony to shift the Ram idol in Ayodhya to a temporary structure. Meanwhile, Kerala has announced free provisions to all ration card holders in the state. We talked to senior journalist Aunindyo Chakravarty on Modi's speech and the government's lack of a policy framework. Thank you so much, Aunindyo, for joining us. So, first question, you heard the Prime Minister's speech yesterday. What was your instant response, other than marveling at the chaos that happened after that? If marveling is right.
Well, my instant response was that are they going to shoot me if I go to buy vegetables? Because one doesn't know what the thing that he did not say, and that caused the chaos. He should have said right away that when he said that there will be a Lakshman Rekha and you can't come out of your house, the thing that he should have told people is, yes, you can come out when you need to go and buy food and medicines and anything that you need, and we will try to deliver. We are already working with state governments, and we've worked out a system by which food would be delivered to you. So please do not rush out. Because what he effectively did is that people rushed out and they went to buy things. And I didn't go out because I thought I would catch the coronavirus. I was certain that there would be many people at my local, kirana store.
Right. So to build on some of those points, we've been discussing this issue for almost every week now. And surprisingly, while as other experts have been talking about it, the central government has especially been quite tight-lipped on the socio-economic aspect of this crisis, how it's going to deal with it. So the Prime Minister did say that a special task force was being set up. Yesterday, the Finance Minister made some announcements, but they seem to be largely targeted at the salaried and middle classes. And there was very little talk about the daily wage laborers, the migrant workers, the thousands who are basically fleeing cities like Mumbai and going back home.
I think it was very clear right from the beginning. I think she tweeted about it as well before the press conference that she was only going to talk about regulatory issues and deadlines. So there were certain deadlines, 31st March, which they extended. And she said that we are already working on a economic package, and we're talking to all different ministries, and it will be out sooner than later. Those are her words. I actually expected that economic package to be announced by the Prime Minister because, as I said, that I tweeted yesterday that at 5:05 p.m., I wouldn't want the FM to take all the credit for things that I'm giving to people. And I expected that it's all going to come at 8 o'clock. It didn't. In fact, if you look at something that Mr. Chidambaram has put out on his tweet, he claims that there is nothing happening as of now, or wasn't happening in the Finance Ministry as far as the economic package is concerned. And you said that you've seen quite heartbreaking videos of people trying to leave the city, being beaten up, being threatened by police. Because what do the police do? They're being told that you need to push people into their homes. They're out there wearing masks and they're scared of people who come near them. And they're being threatened by police. we've seen hundreds of people walking home hundreds of kilometers away because there is no interstate transport. They simply have to leave. It's all very well to tell people to lock down, but you know how people live in a construction site. They basically set up a thing, they go buy some rice, two tomatoes, some vegetables, put it in a thing and they boil it at night and that's what they eat, or that's what they eat during the day. So to say that you lock down in a construction site essentially tells construction workers you have to leave. Right. And we saw scenes of how people were trying to leave Bombay and other cities in trying to get on the trains, and no social distancing was taking place out there.
Right. So the key question finally again would be that two aspects. One, of course, the Prime Minister has announced a health package of 15,000 crores with no real details on exactly how it's going to be spent, you know, who are the agencies going to execute it. But also the question of so the question here would be, what can the central government actually do? Because we have seen state governments coming out with a series of measures. So from a macro perspective or from the central government's perspective, what are the policy measures that it can take right now?
You know, we have been talking about it, as you rightly said, and people could accuse us of being left of the spectrum, and we're always asking the state to intervene and pay money to the poor, and that can cause huge fiscal deficit. But fiscal hawks have been saying the same thing. They're not the only people. People who say that fiscal deficit should be kept at 3%, they are saying that increase it. Spend another 4-5% of the GDP on people. Because if people aren't around, then you won't have an economy. The government had a long time to prepare, and I don't know what they were waiting for. So only the government of India can tell us what plans they have, other than telling people to maybe bajao some thali in their homes now. Obviously, you can't go out anymore.
Right.
So I really don't know. But it's difficult to even read. Everything that one expected were logical extensions of what they have done in the past. I mean, the Modi government itself claims that it has given so many bank accounts to so many people. It claims to be doing these transfers to people. What's happening? Why can't they have been done already? Why couldn't they have been done already? Why could masks, hand sanitizers not have been distributed to people? There is a debate over whether the center's disaster management norms comes into play and states have to follow it, or states have to issue their own directive. The UP government has said that it is going to deliver food to 23 crore people, right? 23 crore people, 10,000 vehicles to deliver those goods. If you have to deliver them twice a week to each family, let's say about 5 crore families in UP, twice a day, each car will have to deliver to about 700 families.
Right.
At once a week. Twice a week, it's 1,400 families, 1,400 homes, each vehicle. Might not be impossible because a lot of homes are probably clustered together in a slum or in a village, group of villages. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's the level of under-preparation we're seeing for the disease, which has been doing the rounds now since, China declared that this was a problem to WHO on the 31st of December. Of course, they lied. They did not say what the extent of the problem is. But on 22nd of January, Wuhan was under lockdown. And we had 2 whole months to prepare for that. So I really don't know what the government has in mind.
Right. So what we're seeing right now is probably a prolonged period of further chaos, which may not be visible on the roads, of course, but inside households, in terms of nutrition, in terms of livelihood, in terms of mental health for that matter, a prolonged crisis, and all of which basically is completely hidden behind doors, so to speak.
Absolutely, hidden behind doors, and there is no concrete statement. I mean, compare that to what Trudeau had to say, right? When he came on, and that's a viral speech, it's viral in India as well. So anyone who understands the English language has probably watched that speech on social media, where he came out and said, okay, if you have this problem, we are going to pay rent, we are going to do this, we are going to do that, businesses will be given. That is the kind of speech we need, either from the Prime Minister or from the Finance Minister. In fact, the Prime Minister, instead of a speech, he had done a teleconference, press conference, made a statement, and then allowed people to ask questions so that he could have clarified each of this, then we would have known. an economic package should have been there yesterday. I mean, actually, day before.
Right.
And not, we shouldn't have to wait for it to come.
Right. Thank you so much, Aunindyo, for talking to us. We'll keep following this issue until the government issues a package.
Thank you, Prashant.
Chalo, thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Talk next week then. Later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Aunindyo. In our next story, we look at the controversial Central Vista project, which may transform the very face of Delhi as we know it. This massive project, which is expected to cost over 20,000 crore, has been announced in haste without much consultation and planning. It will see the demolition of iconic buildings and the construction of a new parliament complex and a residence for the Prime Minister. A few days ago, as the country struggled with COVID-19, the government even published a notification amending land use rules to facilitate the project. Why is the government in such a tearing hurry, for lack of a better word, and what is the idea behind the project? We spoke to the former Deputy Mayor of Shimla and Urban Affairs expert Tikender Singh Panwar to find out. Here is what he had to say. Thank you so much, Tikender, for joining us. So,
Thanks.
one of the first questions that's on a lot of people's minds is what was the tearing hurry for the government to actually release this Gazette notification at this point? The whole country is struggling, it's suffering, it's scared about the coronavirus, and then in the middle of this, there's this massive project which most people don't even know about, and a notification comes out on this.
Well, to me, I think I don't know. The hurry is since beginning, if I could just place it like that. And if you just go by the entire trajectory of how this project has been conceived, commissioned, and finally how it is being executed, there is a very desperate hurry. And the desperate hurry actually goes back to the time period that Modi has. Because he has still 4 more years to go as far as he is in power. And I believe that Central Vista, the Central Vista speaks about the entire region from the Rashtrapati Bhavan along the Rajpath to the India Gate and furthermore. But something very important and formidable that the Central Vista is going to have in the redevelopment process is the construction of the new parliament building. So the hurry is, if they do not start now, and if they do not start the construction work now, then probably they will not be able to execute the entire work within that span of 4 years, And that's why you'll find all sorts of violations have taken place, right from the 1961 Delhi master plan that we had. I mean, that speaks about what would be the land use of that region, of that area, and also the 2021 master plan, where, the hurry, you can actually, it's not just because of the corona. I mean, of course, for corona, the priority should have been how do you mitigate this crisis that is really looming large. But, they will not stop there because actually the desperation is more to stretch to the period of power that Modi has. And, because we've been interviewing lots of people, we've been talking to lots of people. And, the entire idea is a very fascist idea. The way Hitler tried to build that new parliament building and hired Albert Speer. So we have a new Albert Speer in India called Mr. Bimal Patel. That parallel we can draw. Though Bimal Patel was, Albert Speer was fired later. So that hurry actually is one of the driving forces. And, it's completely criminal at the time when the country is facing lockdowns, country is facing curfew. At the same time, stealthily, quietly, the government passes and approves a budget of 20,000 crores, which I think is definitely going to increase to more than 35,000 crores.
Right. So to go back a bit, you talked about the fascist nature of this project. And clearly, probably one definite aspect was Modi's own desire to sort of put his stamp on the center of Delhi, give his own, something the BJP has been very preoccupied with also in terms of establishing its identity. But could you talk about what a lot of experts you've been talking to and you yourself see as some of the central visions of the project?
See, why I call it a fascist project for the simple reason because something very surmounting about a fascist project is that it has to be very giant, And like we have the wrong era. So Modi wants to exhibit his era project, the Modi's era project. And lots of parliamentarians, I can bet on that, 80% of the parliamentarians who actually are going to occupy this building later on do not even know what this parliament is going to be like. And some of the MPs have very castigatingly said that, look, it looks like a 7-star hotel. I mean, it doesn't look like a parliament at all. So, the entire hierarchical question and the kind of uniformity that he's trying to build is quite linked to the fascistic architecture that we have witnessed in Germany. So, and that is one of the driving forces. And if you just take into account where this new parliament building is coming up, it's a designated district park. And a designated district park under the land use very emphatically states that you cannot change the land use. You just cannot change the land use. But the kind of desperation and hurry we are witnessing, all those laws have been kept aside, and not even giving a damn to a very basic fact that a petition is pending in the Supreme Court. Right. Because earlier the High Court said that you cannot change the land use unless and until you come back to us, explain it to us. And there is a procedure to do that. The procedure happens to be that there is an environment impact assessment that has to be done. So instead of having an EIA that's called for one single composite project, what smartly this project has done is that it has fragmented it into 20 different small projects.
Right.
So the colossal loss looks very, very abysmal. Mm-hmm. You're trying to, I mean, you're following what I'm saying.
Right, exactly.
So instead of one single project of the Central Vista, what is being exhibited is in small patches, so that the environment impact assessment doesn't speak the volume of loss that is going to happen.
Right.
So all that has been challenged by well-meaning people, architects in the court. And the High Court initially said that, look, you have to come back to us. Then the High Court overruled that with the new judge, all those changes that took place in the judiciary, right, especially in the High Court. And the petitioners have gone to the Supreme Court. So now it's pending in the Supreme Court. So it's a sub judice matter. So instead of waiting for the Supreme Court to decide, the government has sanctioned this project.
Right.
We have not gone into the details of what would be the effect of this project. For example, lots of buildings are going to be torn down. Mm-hmm. And I think, Prashant, one of the important arguments that is being forwarded by the government of India is that, look, the old architecture, especially the architecture of the old Parliament building and the North Block and the South Block, speaks about like it's a colonial architecture,
right.
Whereas that is not true at all. Actually, this is what we learned when we interviewed some of the historians, art historians, and architects. And there's something very interesting that was pointed out by one of the historians, that the Britishers left the British architecture in Calcutta when they moved their capital from Calcutta to Delhi. Winter capital was Calcutta and summer capital was Shimla. So if you just visit these two cities, you'll come to know the kind of British architecture widely prevalent in these cities. All sorts of things. But not an element, not a bit of that architecture you find in the construction of the Central Vista. That is the Parliament building, or the North Block, the South Block, or the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
Right.
Why? This goes back to and this was pointed out by Swapna Lindell. I remember when I was interviewing her, she said, look, they left their architecture there because the answer to the national freedom movement from the British was this. And in fact, they have quoted, especially Lutyens. They have quoted from Lutyens and many other art historians of the British Raj, pointing out that, look, if they have to continue their Raj in India, they have to do it in a very syncretic manner. So syncretism was an ethos of the older Parliament buildings.
Right.
And they very specifically pointed out Akbar. Can you believe Lutyens and other art historians pointing out Akbar and said that this has to be in sync to Sulh-e-Kul. We had the Dine Ilahi, the Sulh-e-Kul of Akbar.
Okay.
So it's not there. It is our heritage. I mean, it's not the British heritage. That's why you find the red sandstone, I mean, the Mughal part coming up. That is why you find the dome, the temple dome coming up. That is why you find the circular parliament coming up. It's our heritage. And since 1930s, because that's when the building got finally constructed and was taken over by the British, they ruled India through, in those buildings for just 17 years. We have ruled for 70 years.
Right.
So 17 years to 70 years, that is our heritage. It's all actually bogus, because the real intention is Modi wants to create a landmark, that era, the Modi era's stuff. That's why all those bogus arguments are being given.
Right. And finally, one of the key aspects of this project is also that it takes over a lot of public space. So in that context,
Yes.
what is the kind of resistance that is being visualized to this right now in terms of activists coming together and building public movements and consensus around this?
Actually, a large tract right from, as I've told, the open space. This used to be called the boat club, where lots and lots of public meetings used to take place. And especially, and one of the open spaces happens to be the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts. That's completely going to be torn down. And a lot many buildings all around. And you'll find those spaces being monitored or being under surveillance through a sniper on the top, because new buildings are going to come up. So right now, I think there is lots and lots of, as I told you, 80% of the parliamentarians do not know what is going to happen.
Right.
And probably 95% of our Delhi population and our country population doesn't know that the urban spaces, what we call the urban commons, are being usurped. And I remember one of the architects pointed out in a public hearing meeting, probably Raka was there, and she said, look, you are just the custodian, we are the owners.
Right.
I mean, the custodians cannot own the land. But unfortunately, all this is being reversed. And this is a classical style of how neo-fascism also operates, occupying more spaces, the entire gigantism that they want to exhibit. And, because India Gate is not just an open space for protest for the Delhiites. And lots of people who come from outside, lots of, it's a place for many other things, where common people, and especially in Delhi, where 50% of the Delhi citizens live in slums. This is the open space that they have. For heaven's sake, I mean, that's what we have to realize. And all this is being usurped under the guise of that, look, the parliament also happens to be public. No, I think they are just the repository of that. The public happens to be the owners of. So I think, so as far as the movement is concerned, right now that movement is confined to a few architects, their groups, environmentalists, bird watchers, and all those people. It's still not a people's movement. I think that is what is important for the people to realize. But because of this clampdown and all those things that we are happening, that we are experiencing, probably we'll have, like, the NPR has been pushed. We were supposed to have the NPR from. So this movement has also been pushed. But you can understand the kind of hurry that the government showed. I mean, it's actually criminal. It's actually a criminal act on part of the government. Instead of focusing its energies, its strength on mitigating the crisis, it has actually diverted, and it has actually quietly handed over this money to. And it's been. There's one other thing, because we don't have that much time. This completely opaque manner that has been done. It's not a transparent manner. The kind of contract giving, it's a big scandal, let me also tell you, Prashant. Because, the transparency speaks about you ought to have different bids. Can you believe it's a project without a DPR? There is no detailed project report. And our new Albert Speer, I call him Mr. Bimal Patel, he's been moving around in the country exhibiting that. And he said, because some people asked that, look, this was not there in your first slide. I mean, what you've shown now. He said, this is an always evolving project. My God, can you believe that? Without a DPR, I mean, what is this happening in our country? Very strange. So completely opaque project. Yeah. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Tikender, for talking to us. We'll keep following this issue as it progresses.
Thanks, Krishna. Thank you.
That's all we have in this episode of Let's Talk. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with the major news developments of the day. Until then, keep watching NewsClick and stay safe.
you.